What if I told you that the best early childhood education hires aren't the ones with the perfect resumes? They're the ones who pass the heart test and the skill test. And you can screen for both in 30 minutes without guessing, without vibes, and without, we'll see how they do. Because the truth is, we're not hiring for a shift, we're hiring for a culture. And one wrong hire doesn't just cost money, it costs stability, team morale, and ultimately children's consistency. Today's episode is the Purple Cow approach to the early childhood education staffing, a remarkable hiring system that makes the right people say, I want to work there. And it helps the wrong people self select out fast.
Hello, I am AI Beatrice, and welcome to the Elevating ECE podcast. This is the show for early learning directors, owners, program leaders, and entrepreneurs who believe excellence should be sustainable. Each week, you'll hear practical strategies, coaching, systems training, and responsible AI supports to help reduce daily friction, strengthen your team, and protect the work that matters most. Thanks for being here. Let's elevate early childhood together.
Elevating childhood education, where leaders rise, children thrive, and your program becomes a legacy of excellence.
Welcome back to Elevating ECE, where we grow leaders and strengthen programs through wholeness and excellence to build legacy. This is the first installment of our March series entitled Staffing, Culture, and Retention. So we're going to breaking it down this month. And today we're covering how to hire for heart, which includes values and temperament, and also for skill, which includes consistency and competency. Why turnover is not just a staffing problem, it's a systems problem, is what we will also be exploring. A simple three-part hiring scorecard you can reuse every time. Also, interview questions that reveal how someone behaves under pressure, and a call to action that you'll want at the end. A sample interview questionnaire for your ECE staff, and you can plug it right into your process immediately. So, first, let's talk about why this matters, the research reality. Let's ground this in reality, in some truth, because early childhood education leaders don't need guilt, they need tools. Research repeatedly shows that turnover is a major obstacle in early childhood education, also early care. So, for example, one report notes that using national surveys findings that roughly one third of centers had turnover rates of 20% or greater. That is significant. And even in a highly resourced early childhood education network, a study reported 30% of annual turnover. So when we say hire well, we're really saying protect children's continuity, protect teachers' energy, protect culture, and protect your leadership capacity. And here's the tension. Early childhood education staff often face high demands with fewer resources. That's the reality of what we face. And that means the wrong hire doesn't just not work out, they often accelerate the burnout for everyone else. Now let's talk about the big idea. Hire with heart and skill. What does that really mean? In early childhood education, heart without skill looks like great intentions, but inconsistent execution. Skill without heart looks like technically capable, but emotionally unsafe for the children and the culture. So we need to hire for both. The heart equals values and emotional maturity plus child centered instincts. And so, what does that mean? And some things you need to consider is, can they be coached? Can they regulate themselves? Do they naturally protect dignity? The dignity of children, of families, of coworkers? Now let's talk about skill. Skill equals competence, judgment, and consistency. So some things you want to consider here is, can they follow routines? Can they document? Do they understand the importance of it? Can they handle ratios and transitions and safety with calm competence? Something that we really want to highlight here. We don't hire for a warm body. We hire for a safe body. Now let's talk about this hiring system that I've been alluding to. Part A of that system is create a culture promise. Before you interview anyone, get very, very specific. What does it look like to work here when it's healthy? Your culture promise might sound something like, we protect a child's dignity, we speak directly and respectfully, we don't shame children or adults, families or coworkers, we own our role, and we ask for help early. So now why is this important? Because it acts as your filter. It becomes your filter as you are conducting your interview. If you can't describe your culture, then you can't protect your culture. So you want to give some thought to this even before you begin your interviews. Or if you have been interviewing, that is something that you want to start, you want to be able to identify and be able to articulate. For those that are good candidates, it usually will come up as a question for them. What is the climate like here, right? Because it matters to them. So that's something that you want to make sure that you already have in place, or that you, and also that you can articulate well. Now, part B of that system is to use structured interviews, right? Don't just have a conversation off the top of your head, but have it be very structured. Most early child education hiring problems come from unstructured interviews. We chat, we like them, we hire them. But instead of just chatting and making the decision, instead use a structured approach where you have the same core questions and you have the same scoring. Why is this important? Because decades of hiring research suggests that structured methods are generally more predictive than just simply winging it. One well known summary of selection research reports higher validity for structured interviews versus unstructured, and highlights the value of combining methods. So, what does this mean in plain language? If you want better hires, you need a repeatable system, not a gut feeling. Part C of that system is add a work sample. In early childhood education, a work sample can be simple and ethical. No free labor, no exploitation. But think a short scenario and how they respond. And so this matters because meta analytic research has found that work sample tests can be strong predictors of job performance. And so what do these work samples look like that are early childhood education friendly? And these can take roughly about 10 minutes to complete. But number one, you want to give a scenario, right? So a child refuses cleanup and throws the toys. What would you do? What would be your response? Walk me through what your response would be and see how they handle that situation. And so you're looking for red flags and how they would respond, right? If you see that there's some annoyance that comes up on their face, then you know, okay, this is a red flag. This is something that definitely lets us know that there's some other feelings behind what they may articulate. Another scenario can be a parent is upset at pickup. What is the first thing that you say? And watch how they respond. Another scenario could be you walk into a classroom and it's chaotic. Everything is all over the place. The children are all over the place. What's the first three moves that you would take? And see how they respond. From their response, you'll see what is a priority to them, because that'll be a part of their three things. And so you want to make sure that it aligns to child development, best practices, as well as your vision, mission, your values, and your culture. Remember, resumes tell you what they've done, but work samples could be so much more useful in that they can show you how they think. Part D of the system is the scorecard. So it's the heart plus the skill plus the culture fit. That is what you're looking for on this scorecard. So here's the scorecard. So you want to score them between a 1 and a 5 for each of these, right? So you want to look at them for heart. You're looking at whether or not they are empathetic, whether or not they're accountable, if they're coachable and flexible. When you're looking at skill or scoring them for skill, you want to look at routines, their safety judgment, communication. When you're scoring them for culture, you want to make sure that they align with your culture promise in your discussion with them, and that those scenarios that you give and those work samples, you want to see how they respond and see how it aligns to your culture promise. And so if they're a 5 in skill but a 2 in heart, that can be a culture leak. If they're a 5 in heart but a 2 in skill, you'll most likely burn out your team trying to carry them. So those are things you really want to consider. Next, let's talk about culture and retention. So we want to identify some stay factors. So do you want retention? If so, your hiring process should preview your culture clearly. You want to make sure that you have that and you can articulate that right up front. That's important when it comes to retention, and we'll talk about why. One study found out that predictors of staying included a positive work environment. So you're not just hiring staff, you're building conditions where good people want to stay. And this is where leaders win or lose the team, which we can consider psychological safety. Amy Edmondson's definition is often cited as a belief that one will not be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, questions, concerns, or mistakes. In early childhood education, psychological safety is how you keep quality staff from silently suffering until they quit. People don't leave hard work, they leave unsafe environments. Now let's talk about the exact interview questions that reveal the heart and the skill. So here are a few truth questions you can use. And remember, the heart questions are the values plus maturity. So, number 1, tell me about a time you received corrective feedback. What did you do next? Number 2, when you're overwhelmed, what do you do to regulate before responding to children? Number 3, what does child dignity mean to you in a real moment, like toileting, biting, or tantrums? What does child dignity look like in those situations? And then you also want to think of questions that are directly specific. We've been talking tonight more so about dignity, child dignity, right? But if that's not one of your culture goals, then you want to make sure that you do put something in there that aligns directly to what your culture goals are. Next, you want to ask some skill questions, right? And the skill questions are judgment plus consistency. So you want to ask a question like, walk me through your ideal daily routine for preschool. Or if you're hiring them for the infant and toddler classroom, then you want to ask them for their ideal daily routine in the classroom. Then you can ask, what are your non-negotiables for safety and supervision? You can also ask, how do you handle documentation for like incidents and behaviors, developmental notes, without it taking over your day? How do you handle those? How do you complete those? Or do you? Next, you want to ask some culture questions, right? So these, you want to find out if they're a good fit for your culture. You can ask, what kind of team environment helps you thrive? What kind of environment makes you shut down? How do you prefer to resolve conflict with a coworker or with a parent? So you want to make sure that you listen for ownership language. I did, I asked, I learned. Those types of things you want to, that's the type of language you want to hear. You want to make sure that they avoid the blame loops, right? So you want to listen for things like they always, or they made me, it wasn't my fault, they did, or they said, right? So you want to avoid those blame loops. You want to hear more ownership in the language that they give. Talk about what they did, what my experience is. I learned, I did, right? So that's the type of language you want to look for. And these are typically things that will come up in the interview. I've had staff where or candidates that I interview, and while interviewing them, they open up about, something that their old employer did that was totally unfair, or that what they didn't do, or how they treated them, right? Sometimes they can go down a whole rabbit hole and talking about what their past experience is, right? I've even had people break down and cry and all of those sorts of things. And so, not saying that people don't experience real trauma where they come from or at their workplaces, but something we want to watch for is we want to look out for those when we're bringing them on board, right? Because you could be bringing on a problem, especially if the red flag shows up and you ignore it. So let's wrap it up with this. Your hiring system is your culture protection plan. If you want a plug and play tool, what we went over today, I have a sample of that. I have it down in the description box below, and also a sample of the questionnaire for the interview. I also have included a link for that down in the description box below. And of course, you take that, but you use it as a template and you really adjust it and modify it so that it aligns to your values and your culture goals for your particular program. And so the questionnaire includes the heart and skill questions that we talked about, the scenario work samples, and also the 1 to 5 scoring rubric, the red flags and the green flags, the things that you don't want to see, that you want to avoid, and the things you want to see, as we talked about the language. Also, a reference check mini script, the questions that you can ask when you are reaching out to references. And so all of this is very important that you have it. And as we started off talking about, it's very important that you have these things and that it is the standard. Each time you interview, that you're not winging it, that you have a script, that you have this questionnaire that you're working from, that it has a scoring system, that also your references, that there's also a scripted or form that you complete. In my programs, we have a questionnaire. It has a scoring system to it, and we also have our reference forms that we utilize, right? So when we call the references, we ask very specific questions. So what are next steps? Grab your sample interview questionnaire linked in the description below. If you're on our email list, you'll receive it anyway because we are sending out resources and tools each week. If you're not a part of our email list, please make sure that you share your email. You can do that when you go to the link for the free tool or resource this week in the description. And also, you want to subscribe so that you can stay abreast of these conversations as we are breaking it down this month and even in the episodes to come. So, if this episode helps you, share it with a director or an owner, someone that you know who's in the process of hiring or needs to hire. Most of the programs I know are always looking to hire, right? And so, this is some good information to share with them because staffing gets lighter when leadership gets smarter. Next episode in March, we're talking about onboarding that actually retains. We're talking about the first 14 days, a 14-day system on how to get people to want to stay. Today, we talked about having them want to come work with us. Next week, we're going to talk about how to get them to want to stay. We're going to talk about our onboarding process. And so thank you for your time today. And until we meet again, go and be great. Thank you for being here. Let's continue to elevate early childhood education together.
Elevating childhood education, where leaders rise, children thrive, and your program becomes a legacy of education.